A story about a drifter who conspires with a woman to kill her husband so they can be together. A story of an insurance salesman who conspires to kill a woman's husband for her and the insurance policy money. A divorced woman who works her way up during the Great Depression from waitress to owning a small restaurant chain and spends that money on an ungrateful brat's music career. And the Coen brothers took from all three to create a story about a barber in post-war America who wants to invest in dry cleaning. How does this story relate to the previous three? Well, it relates in many ways, but the two similar traits are the downfall that all these characters inevitably experience and desire. They all have something they desire that leads to their downfall. The movie The Man Who Wasn't There was a 2001 movie directed by the Coen brothers. It's the unofficial third movie of a trilogy, the Hardboiled trilogy or the John Polito trilogy, because he's in all three. I call it Hardboiled because all three of the movies are each heavily influenced by a hard-boiled writer. The first being Miller's Crossing with Dashiell Hammett, second, Big Lebowski with Raymond Chandler, and The Man Who Wasn't There with James N. Cain. Cain was one of the three giants of the hard-boiled genre, the other two being Chandler and Hammett, of course. Now the latter two specialized in hard-boiled detective fiction, Chandler using Philip Marlowe, while Hammett used a variety of detectives like the nameless Continental Op, Sam Spade, and Nick Charles. Cain's iconic stories didn't revolve around private detectives. They revolved around those doing the crimes, which made him different, but his stories were just as captivating. They were some of the most potent and tragic Great Depression stories of his time, often being novellas of 100-ish pages, like The Postman Always Rings Twice and Double Indemnity. But Mildred Pierce was about 300 pages. As said before, these stories were rather tragic, with people leading themselves to their downfall with their own selfish desires. In Postman, it's Frank Chambers, a drifter who lands a job at a greasy spoon/rest stop, where he falls in love with his boss's wife, Cora, and they conspire to kill her husband, so they can be together and run the rest stop. They fail on the first time but succeed on the second, before being arrested. But miracle upon miracle happens. They get off even when Frank signs a complaint against her, and she pleads guilty, thanks to their lawyer.
That's it, you're free.
They run a successful revamped restaurant, and even when they have their troubles, like a blackmailer, they still solve them. Ultimately, a random incident is what seals their fate. A sort of cosmic and tragic justice. There are 7 adaptations, but the more notable ones are The Postman Rings Twice from 1946, directed by Tay Garnett, starring John Garfield and Lana Turner, a 1943 Italian one, Obsession, directed by Luchino Visconti, and one from 1981, directed by Bob Rafelson, written by David Mamet. The most well-known version is the 1946 one, which is a classic of film noir. The 81 version I'm not a big fan of, despite an all-star cast with Jack Nicholson, Jessica Lange, and Michael Lerner, who would have been a great fit to play the lawyer. But it was directed by Bob Rafelson, who is a great director as seen with 5 Easy Pieces and King of Marvin Gardens, but his hyper-realistic style doesn't work well for such a story, and instead had a slow, lethargic energy to it. Double Indemnity is about an insurance agent, Walter Neff, who quickly discovers that a woman, Phyllis Nerdlinger, is trying to buy a policy in order to kill her husband, but quickly gets on board and helps her execute it, which they succeed in. Their scheme slowly falls apart when the insurance detective Barton Keyes slowly pokes holes in their claim, which ultimately leads to their downfall. The novella was adapted into one of the most famous noirs, directed and co-written by Billy Wilder, and the other co-writer being Raymond Chandler. I must say in my opinion that the movie is, in this case, better than the book. The book is good, it just doesn't live up to The Postman. And also the movie has a lot of talent behind it with Wilder and Chandler, along with Barbara Stanwyck as Phyllis, Fred McMurray as Neff, and the legendary Edward G. Robinson as Keyes. Chandler and Wilder punched up the story and dialogue as well.
There's a speed limit in this state, Mr. Neff. 45 miles an hour.
How fast was I going, officer?
I'd say around 90.
Suppose you get down off your motorcycle and give me a ticket.
Suppose I let you off with a warning this time.
Suppose it doesn't take.
Some of their additions even led Cain to say if he thought of that stuff when writing the book, he would have added it. Mildred was by far the longest of the 3 books, and the only one to have been written in the third person. The story is the saga of Mildred, who married a successful man at a young age who worked under real estate. But as the Depression came along, their wealth rapidly deteriorated, and they ended up separating with Mildred being stuck raising the kids. She gets so broke she takes up a waitress job, and learning from it begins selling pies to the restaurant and becomes successful, eventually running a chain of restaurants. Her vice, her daughter Vida, is awful.
My mother, a waitress.
And aspires to be a musician. She tries to be a pianist at first, but eventually becomes a coloratura soprano, and Mildred does everything to make sure Vera's dreams come true, despite the cost, which is what leads to her downfall. Vera is not grateful to her mother, and as a matter of fact, pretty much a sociopath, loving her mother's money and seemingly nothing else. It's a remarkable novel with two notable adaptations. One with Joan Crawford, directed by Michael Curtiz, who also directed Casablanca, and an HBO miniseries that came out in 2011, directed by Todd Haynes, starring Kate Winslet and Guy Pearce. The Joan Crawford one was remarkably different from the book, but a classic noir none other less. It's funny that a lot of Cain's adaptations translated so well to film, considering he couldn't make it as a screenwriter, barely having any notable credits in that field. But his adaptations in the 40s were consistently great, and all came out in a 3-year period. Cain was not only very different from Chandler and Hammett with his style, but also his lifestyle, as he didn't put out several great novels and then burn out because of alcoholism and die. He lived up until 1977 at age 85, where he was still publishing novels till his death, and even had several posthumously published. But the novels he wrote after the 40s weren't up to snuff with his earlier work, and so instead of crashing and burning, he fizzled, publishing novels with mediocre reception. But legacy-wise, he was up there with Chandler, Hammett, and some might even say Hemingway. Now, the story of the man who wasn't there does not take place during the Great Depression. As a matter of fact, it takes place in post-World War II America, a time of prosperity and rapid growth. It takes place in Santa Rosa, California, a quiet small town not too far from San Francisco and Sacramento, different from the LA-centric Cain novels. The main character is Ed Crane, played by Billy Bob Thornton, a barber who likes to keep to himself, but his fellow barber/brother-in-law, who owns the shop, Frank, played by Michael Badalucco, talks non-stop. Ed is married to Doris Crane, played by Frances McDormand, who is an alcoholic and vain, cheating on Ed with Tony Soprano. Well, Big Dave, played by James Gandolfini.
The Japs had eaten the son of a bitch. It's a scrawny, pimply kid. I mean, nothing to write home about. I mean, I never would have,
Who runs a department store that Doris works at, Nerdlingers. A familiar name, and he kinda looks familiar to this guy from Postman. He is married to a woman who, like Ed, isn't much of a talker, but she actually owns the store. Ed doesn't like his job, because the hair never stops growing.
It keeps growing. It's part of us. And we cut it off and throw it away.
And he desperately seeks a change, which he gets when a non-sketchy businessman, Creighton Tolliver, in a hair hat comes to the shop for a haircut of what is left. He casually mentions his idea for a dry cleaning business and what he needs for it in a casual offhand manner. This is the ignition for Ed's change. Ed decides to invest in this guy and devises a scheme to get the necessary $10,000. He blackmails Big Dave about his affair with Doris and gets the money. Yes, he blackmails someone to get money to give to this guy who oozes nothing but trust, to invest in dry cleaning, a process that wasn't well known yet, and if it didn't exist would sound like a scam.
Wash without water.
Ed gets the money and hands it over to Creighton. But shortly after that, Big Dave discovers it was him and they get in a conflict, where Big Dave is no more. Doris is presumed to have done it and is arrested. Ed asks his friend Walter Abundis, played by Richard Jenkins, an estate lawyer, for a recommendation. He recommends Freddie Riedenschneider, played by Tony Shalhoub.
Riedenschneider.
Walter also has a daughter, Birdie, played by a young Scarlett Johansson. She, like Vida, plays the piano, but isn't spoiled or narcissistic. More like the daughter from Double Indemnity. Ed likes the way she plays the piano, usually playing Beethoven as the movie's leitmotif, which just means a recurring song. Ed becomes fixated on her, but not in a Minecraft YouTuber kind of way. He sees her as a kind of pseudo-daughter he never had, and frequently listens to her play. Riedenschneider is not cheap, and as a result, Frank agrees to sign the barbershop over to the bank for a loan. A barbershop his father worked his whole life to own. Riedenschneider is an interesting character, based off that skilled lawyer in Postman. He is someone whose only objective is winning, and he'll provide any case he can while racking up the bill. but he doesn't seem to be as good as a lawyer as his reputation, and seems more interested in using semantics than anything else.
Perception. Reality. Doubt. Reasonable doubt.
Ed even admits to the killing. Marie and Schneider dismisses it as it can't be corroborated, instead focusing on Big Dave, lying about his military service, not his violent history, which definitely could have been used as a case for self-defense, especially considering the cracks in the glass. But the case never happens as Doris takes her own life, and it's revealed she was pregnant, but not with Ed's baby. Ed gives more of his attention to Birdie, and really believes she has talent, even going out of the way to set her up with a music teacher in Sacramento, like Mildred did with Vera. But upon Birdie meeting the
Jacques Carcinogus. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right. Anyway, a Frenchman.
it's revealed that Birdie isn't as talented as Ed thought, which is similar to Mildred finding out that her daughter isn't a talent on the piano in an even more rude fashion. They both wanted, in a way, to live through them. Ed was someone who kind of just fell into the life he was living. He was set up with Doris through a friend, and she fairly soon suggested they get married after a few weeks, which led him into becoming a barber. He didn't serve in World War II either, due to fallen arches, so he's really someone who's lived a very passive life up until the blackmail scheme. So seeing a young girl with all of her life ahead of her, who can play the piano, well, to Ed's ears, and to mine, she doesn't sound too bad, he tries to push her to become something great, that he wishes he did when he was younger.
No, I have to do it. I can't stand by and watch any more things go down the drain. You're young, you don't understand.
And maybe benefit as an agent. The same with Mildred, who married a wealthy guy at a young age and became a mother early. She ended up struggling later when she had to provide because she had no experience, which is why she spoiled Vita so much. But Birdie misinterprets Ed's fatherly behavior and tries to do something to him while he's driving. Ed, again, isn't a Minecraft YouTuber and tries to stop it, causing an accident in which he is rendered unconscious. He isn't really quite understood by anyone, even Creighton, who makes a pass at him, because why else would he be so quick to give him $10,000? Upon waking up, he is placed under arrest as they find the body of Creighton. They think he did it. He hires Riedenschneider again, signing over his house, but due to fate, he is sentenced to death. Ed isn't sad as he states he has no regrets, and that he didn't like being a barber. He liked living on the edge, and not in his cushy, but repetitive job. He was an odd man, like an alien from another planet. He accepts his fate. The movie, in terms of structure, is like Postman, especially the first trial, and with the accident, and then the turn of bad luck, as well as the story being told through the confessional he wrote in prison. Ed is a very interesting movie character, based on 50s instructional videos. He is very quiet and pondering. He doesn't talk much and lives a large part of his life as more of an observer. He doesn't show much emotion, except for when he's around Birdie. He isn't a drifter or a charismatic insurance salesman who wants a woman, nor is he a mother struggling through the Great Depression. He's a barber, and his ultimate desire isn't lust or greed, it's excitement, and he pays the price for it. 3 people die because of him. His wife, Big Dave, and Creighton, who turned out to be not so much of a con artist, supposedly. He also ruined a family business with them giving it to the bank, and Frank has a nervous breakdown because of Doris's death. He caused a lot of pain and suffering for some excitement. He should have just found a hobby like bowling or writing a screenplay. I would say this is a good Coen Brothers movie under the radar. It's an amusing watch, but it's also tragic. It has great cinematography from Roger Deakins, and a good score by Carter Burwell, who also did the score for the 2011 Mildred Pierce miniseries. It didn't make any money, but it was critically well received and the French liked it. It captures the essence of a Cain novel quite well, but I'd still recommend reading the 3 Cain novels. Postman and Double are good weekend reads, and Mildred is a good read for a plane or just throughout the week. He has other acclaimed novels like Serenade and the Butterfly, if you like him a lot, but they're harder to find. I suggest a used bookstore or just thrift books. If there were any other influences I missed out on from Cain, or other works like sci-fi movies, because I know they were an influence on the film as well, feel free to let me know. And thank you for 500 subs.